Alright, g'day everyone and welcome back to ICBM Escalation. I'm travelling a little bit more than expected, so we're back with this title. And having looked a little bit at this mission today, Perestroika, I'm thinking that it's intended to be probably less complex, less difficult than the last one, and more serve a kind of interesting narrative function. This is sort of the victory lap mission, I think, that separates the first half of the campaign from the second half of the campaign, if I'm reading it correctly. Because for all of the missions so far, the big bad opponent has been the Soviet Union, and the level of complexity, the scale of the fighting has continuously increased. Now suddenly we're watching the Soviet Union collapse before our eyes. In fact, really, we're involved in this scenario because a bunch of leaders in the former Soviet Union, or still current Soviet Union at this point, because the loyalists and whatnot still technically claim to be loyal to the thing, it's just the separatists over there, our new friends who are breaking off, seem to have gone with the we need a ride not ammunition option and are asking their former opponents, the United States, to get their VIPs out of the country, and presumably they'll owe us a favour afterwards. So what I'm going to do this mission is try and be as low impact as possible. I've separated up, I've got all of my special forces teams in naval task groups, there are only a couple of them. They're going to head towards the country as rapidly as possible. And then we have a couple of objectives. I've separated my strategic bombers into three groups, two sets of standard stealth bombers, B-21 Raiders, and our new high-speed bombers. They're going to start working on the critical ultranationalist targets straight away. So the high speeds are sailing in towards the air bases in the east. I'm going to get the stealth bombers as soon as we have satellite recon in the west. Start picking apart the ultranationalist military machine so the loyalists, the orange colour, and the separatists have the best chances possible. Our second military objective is to save the separatists. As you can see, the Baltic states are not looking so good right now. We need to protect them, we need to protect Georgia. So I'm moving up divisions, but hopefully we don't end up in a sloggy match with Soviet troops, because I imagine both from a US political perspective, where you probably don't want to see a lot of casualties, and also from a propaganda perspective in the Soviet Civil War, you don't want to see American troops playing too direct a role. So we'll march our troops into the free Baltic states because they're going to be our mates, they're going to join NATO, but we'll avoid walking into any orange or red territory. That leaves the VIP extraction question. So this is a logistics exercise which is going to combine SFT micro with some good airborne logistics and also the habit of blasting apart obstacles in the way. But we'll get to that when we get to it. For now, what I'm going to do is get these special forces teams that were starting in the UK, and we're going to distribute them. One's going to go into Poland, the other two will get sent to Turkey, and then we're going to start a retrieval operation to start pulling out VIPs from safe areas while we make the not so safe areas into safe areas through the liberal application of high explosives. I'm going to be exploiting things like the ability to relay using our new long-range helicopters. For example, we can fly a helicopter from Alaska all the way to Magadan, but we can also fly helicopters off the USS Abraham Lincoln. So if we can position the carrier like around here, we can technically say, for example, we could lift a special forces team from Mongolia back to the carrier, deploy them from the carrier to the far east of Russia, and then pick them up and shuttle them back to Alaska. That's the plan anyway. And I've been setting up those little relays around the country. So we'll see how quickly we can do it. Final point before we get started in terms of technology, just in case we need to speed things up, and also just because I think it's a thematic thing that would be funded under the circumstances, is we're going to go orbital drop pods. I'm going to go powered nanomaterial armor, which is basically the first tier of power armor. Powered exoskeletons, new nanomaterials. Let's get the full, not even Helldivers, let's get the full ODST experience going. And then let's get infantry orbital drop capsules. Shortly after astronauts safely returned from space in re-entry capsules for the first time, military planners were quick to conceptualize a system where military forces could be launched into space and then be rapidly deployed anywhere in the world within hours by dropping from orbit in a capsule, just like astronauts. At conception, this was a flawed and implausible concept, as there were major issues. Yeah. However, spaceflight technology becoming cheaper, more accessible, more capable, etc. What this allows you to do is go to your space center, the Kennedy Space Center, build a space shuttle, and then use it to deploy special forces teams anywhere in the world. So I figure if we are running behind and we need to get a special forces team somewhere that's difficult to get, instead of slowly infiltrating them across the country, we can at least handle the infiltration component by dropping them from space using the space shuttle. Now, thematically for me, I don't want to do that to troops unless they're wearing some form of power armor. So we're going to get that first, followed by 3D printing, the final production technology, and then two things for the Navy. Experimental stealth warships, which makes them harder to detect, but also increases their firepower and lets them use more laser weapons. And then we're going to work towards those laser weapons, starting with laser CIWS, which will replace the conventional CIWS we've had operating since the Cuban Missile Crisis, with lasers, high-powered lasers, which are just going to be that little bit more responsive. That's the overall plan, I think. Troops moving into position, SF's going to begin to deploy, but the first thing to happen is the high-speed suborbital bombers will be taking off. There they go. And let's just see how fast these things are. There you go. As you can see, once you get to suborbital, high speed is not an exaggeration. So the Civil War is clearly on. Our satellites are overhead. We're IDing ultranationalist facilities. So what I'm going to do is take those out, I think. Is there anything else that's juicier? Now, there's mobile SAMs and stuff, and there's a lot of troops pushing towards the Baltic states. What we need to do is probably eliminate that Army HQ. But before we do that, let's wipe out this Air Force base by shooting across the border. I'm not going to walk into Russian territory, but we'll shoot across the border to kill the airbase in Kaliningrad. That'll give us local air superiority at least. And then, one thing to think about is that rotorcraft upgrade, unconventional rotorcraft, which lets our SF helicopters go a long way, also lets our attack helicopters fly a really long way. So once we get those fighters out of the way, we can send attack helicopters to fly from the UK to start picking apart these divisions in the Baltics, hopefully without having to slug it out head to head. Anyway, let's let the first of these high-speed bombers come in, because as you can see, they're picking on these loyalist army divisions. We don't want that. The high-speed bombers are primarily nuclear delivery platforms, but they do have conventional bombs, and as you can see, they're faster than the SAMs, which makes them kind of hard to hit. All right, the relay bombing is working fine, and they're wasting a lot of missiles on a bomber they cannot hit. I imagine it's possible for them to get lucky. For example, he did the right-hand turn and thus went through more danger. But Airbase 1 eliminated, switch to Airbase 2, and I don't think they're going to be able to touch us. Meanwhile, as you can see, the stealth bombers are on their way. Cruise missiles will be launching. We've got a Special Forces team on the USS Miami that'll want to get this VIP from around Murmansk. To do that, we'll need to eliminate all of the forces in the area first. That might include the coastal missile batteries, in fact it will, and the security checkpoint, which we will, of course, in true American style, we will eliminate the 15 blokes checking passports with a salvo of expensive cruise missiles, because our SFs apparently don't know how to pay bribes and speak Russian. But once we do that, we can get the Special Forces team in, grab the VIP in Murmansk, and then I'm thinking the exfil will probably just be drop them in Finland, in Norway, because Finland and Sweden are not part of NATO yet. So we'll drop them in Norway, that'll be the exfil, and then we'll drop them back, and then probably move south towards St. Petersburg, grab them, and then they might be able to, can they helicopter out? Yes, they can. So if we can get to if we can clear St. Petersburg, grab the VIP, we can helicopter out to the UK. So it's all going to be about transport efficiency. Do we have our first SF? We have our first SF available in Sterling Lines. We'll deploy them to Poland, and then I'm going to walk them into Loyalist territory. The Loyalists have Moscow, so it's a pretty strong start. The one I want to get early, though, is going to be this one. This is the Yamantau complex. This is basically the Russian Cheyenne Mountain. This person's in a really awkward position because they are well into ultranationalist territory, but apparently they're on our side. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get our SFs like a visitor's pass. The Yamantau, like do we just walk up? But in any case, I want to get him out, evac, since that's one of the harder ones, and then we'll work the easier ones while we're waiting for other things to be cleared out. So then we can clear Moscow, still Kiev at this point. So we'll pull those out and go from there. Okay, Kaliningrad airbase is about to go, which is good because it's still launching fighters, and that should be air superiority handled. Let's not cross the border just yet, but what we can absolutely do is start picking on these Russian ultranationalist divisions. I'll split the targeting there just in case I forget to do more. And we should be getting these next-gen attack helicopters running over and then popping some Jagams into some fools. Looks like the strategic bombers have taken out their first targets, so we will retarget those. What I'm thinking I'm going to do is we'll go one on the SAM site. Is there any other air defense in the area? We'll pop that one. So we'll pop 2 SAM sites, and then as soon as this base is destroyed, what we'll do is we'll switch a follow-up to GBUs, and then we'll use GBUs to clear 6th Army headquarters in St. Petersburg. Are we destroying this airbase? We are. Wonderful. 1 or 2 more bombs should do it. And then I'm thinking we move on to the next one. Which one's the Pasadena? Oh yeah, the Pasadena's, this was carrying special forces, and I'm like, it would be more useful if it was in Spain, to be honest, because we're going to do a helicopter relay for it. We have Spec Ops helicopters here too. So we'll launch those, recover those, and then Sterling Lines can recover this one. Just get the SFs operating as fast as possible. The attack helicopters arrive, and the T-72s start melting. Because frankly, this isn't fair. And we don't want fair, we're not in the fair area of the game. The way the technology goes is we're nearing the top of the curve. We're nearing the point where our advantage is going to be as big as it will ever be, because we're going to start running out of tree. And then looking at the names on the mission list, we're about to spend some time dealing with the post-2001 stuff for a couple of decades while everyone else catches up. That said, we're not at the end of the curve yet. Air superiority still has a few more enhancements I can make. Anti-air lasers will be a big one. I can improve my radar technology a little more, which will be a big one. So there's still some things I can slap onto the Air Force to make it even more dominant, but I'm going to run out of Air Force tech soon. And then we're going to pivot into dominance in other domains. In particular, I'm looking at space, but we'll talk about that more a little bit later on. For now, let's save the Baltic states. I'm not sure it's a good sign when the first tech on the steal list from the ultranationalists turns out to be basic biological weapons, which is weaponized rabbit fever of all things. But it is what it is. Good reason to make sure these people aren't the ones running what's left of the Soviet Union after this is done. Let's go grab Gorbachev and his mates. The first Spec Ops team is infiltrating now. Let's get them to Moscow. And then over to Yamantau. Cataract is recovering its SFs. So let's fly them over. You need to recover that team too. And then Sterling, you've got your helicopter back, pick up that team, and then we'll send 3 SF teams out all at the same time, pretty much. Oh, also, I split this carrier group. So the Theodore Roosevelt's going into the Med, but I'm splitting off the Leyte Gulf and an escorting destroyer. They're going into the Baltic states because there is nothing that says your sovereignty is recognized, quite like a US warship parked in your port with all of its cruise missiles in its VLSLs ready to strenuously contest the claim of anyone who denies your independence. So Baltic states, we're on our way. Okay, GBU's away. That headquarters is destroyed, but not before it was able to spawn a lot more divisions that are going to create more problems for the Baltic states. So what I'm going to do is I have this GBU, half my bombers are on GBUs, half are on cruise missiles. The cruise missiles are going to steadily pick apart air defenses, sensors, work their way towards this airbase here, and just sort of clear out the offensive capacity of the ultranationalist part of the Soviet Union. Once their air power and once we've done SEAD, DEAD and taken out their air power, I'm going to have to pick apart everything else, including the security checkpoints, which make collecting VIPs very difficult, but no rush. The SFs aren't there yet. We're only 3 and a bit minutes in. So what I'm going to do is actually dedicate... Oh, I need to wait for the air... Once the bombers get back and refuel, I might dedicate some of our strategic bombers to blasting divisions, just to take some pressure off the Baltic states, because the less fighting that actually happens around these cities, the better. And I need to remove these divisions before it's safe for us to move up. If we don't want any American casualties, I need to remove those divisions before it's safe to move up to Riga and Tallinn. So, yeah. That said, good effect on target so far. Once the high-speed bombers are done in the Far East, I might pivot some in to take out this security checkpoint. Great use of resources. I hate to imagine what a sortie cost on one of those things is, just because otherwise USSR Miami is just waiting patiently to deploy its SFs, which we can't do with a security checkpoint and coastal missile battery in the way. Okay, the ultranationalists continue to struggle with the problem of trying to shoot conventional anti-aircraft missiles against a aircraft, quote unquote, that is bouncing on the top of the atmosphere at the limits of space. So that should be most of their air power eliminated. Let's clear the road. Since these things are dropping conventional bombs, they're really going to struggle against anything that's moving, I imagine. But that probably doesn't qualify here. So let's blast the security checkpoint and this static coastal missile battery. Clear the way for Miami's special forces. Speaking of those special forces, how are we doing the rest? So Topeka's going to drop a special forces team up in the far north. We're going to infiltrate a bunch of them in the far east. The Lincoln will be able to clear everything around Vladivostok, and that'll basically be our plan for relaying in the east. We've landed 2 teams in Turkey. They're going to go quiet and undercover. They're going to cut through Iran, who hopefully won't notice the American Special Forces operators and their robot buddies cutting through the country, circle up through Central Asia, and go for these VIPs, just because they're going to be a pain to get to. But we're about to get powered nanomaterial armor, so let's just watch that upgrade. Beautiful. You can even see the health bar go down because now their maximum health and damage resistance is both improved. 14 minutes, 22 seconds until the drop capsules, which will give us an emergency option if we need it. Okay, Special Forces inserted near Murmansk. Let's grab that VIP. Special Forces have VIPs secured and are in tow. Requesting orders for extraction. We have to carry the VIPs to NATO or US, I assumed you did, and drop them there to ensure their safety. Let's, so the VIP hopefully won't worry about us taking a little bit of a scenic diversion here. We'll just, with them in tow, quietly C4 that battery, grab them, and then they can enjoy their rapid transit over to Norway. But you know what? They get a little bit of free entertainment. They get to leave Murmansk. They get to see a coastal missile battery overrun by some operators. And then they get a nice little trip to Norway. And we'll just drop them off. Great, VIP secure and in friendly territory. Put them back on the Miami. And what the Miami is going to do is carry them down here, put them here, and then it's going to be a nice leisurely stroll down to St. Petersburg and then extraction by helicopter. This is where I imagine a little bit of the micro in the mission comes in. We need to get this Special Forces team down here to the Yamantau complex. But you can see, I think all I'm going to do is be patient here. Even though we are in a little bit of a hurry, let's just let these Loyalist division eliminate these ultranationalists, and then once they're out of the way, leisurely stroll down to Yamantau. I could go the long way around via Chelyabinsk, but I wouldn't wish that on my Special Forces operators, so instead we'll take the direct route in a moment. The Lincoln has arrived in the east. We'll bring it right into Vladivostok. We'll use it to clear away all of this infrastructure. That's an anti-aircraft gun site, so electronic warfare aircraft. I don't see any more air defenses in this area. Get 6th generation fighters to smack the jammers and the army bases. Strategic bombers can handle the Air Force base once they're done. Everyone's tasked at the moment. Not quite. Yeah, okay, that's all bombers tasked. But this deconstructing their military capacity is working really, really well. As soon as the Special Forces are in, we'll switch some of our bombers, especially our 6th gens over here, to explicitly clearing out the security checkpoints and getting as many VIPs out as quickly as possible. To string Congress along, I do have a plan, but we'll get to that in a moment. Arriving in Yakutsk. Grab the Russian, not Soviet VIP, Russian VIP, although Russian Soviet Republic VIP. Do we have enough range with the helicopter? Not quite. So what we'll do is we'll pull the Special Forces team back up to here, and then they can fly to Alaska. All right, things are looking much better around here. So let's grab that VIP from Yamantau. Sir, your ride is here, unconventional pickup. They should have put a no Uber zone out the front of their secret nuclear base, but that's what it is. SF team, let's route them out. And you don't get sent to Norway, you get to go to Poland. As for the SFs off the carrier, they have a lot of range. So what we can actually do is infiltrate them over here, I think. That airbase is not out of the way yet, so they can go a little bit further on land because I don't want to get them slapped by fighters. We'll deploy these SF teams and then they will go to Irkutsk and probably Novosibirsk. And I think that's most of that dealt with. Do we have the range? We do. So we'll go pick that Special Forces team up now. These ones are arriving. Let's pick up 2 of these Central Asian VIPs. I think there's a 3rd Spec Ops team on the way. There is. So you can grab this guy. And And then, yeah, one VIP, one SF from the east here, one SF there, and that's most of that area taken care of. Yep, great. So we'll pick up all 3 of these VIPs and shuttle them all back to Turkey. And yes, it was safe to move into Georgia for the moment now, because as far as I can see, there are no Soviet divisions around. Evil Soviet divisions as opposed to friendly Soviet divisions. So we'll dig in. Actually, no, we won't, because there are more divisions coming. I'm trying to get the right mix of symbolism. What we might do is dig in behind the Georgian divisions and route air power so they never arrive. Again, trying to avoid casualties on the divisions. But realistically, what we want to do is make sure they don't cause any more civilian casualties in the Georgian capital. So we might dig in, and I'll route in air power. Let's switch to, is it a clear road? It is. So GBUs, 1 division, 2 division, 3 division, and you don't have any bombers back. Oh, you're still attacking Belay Air Force Base. That's okay. We can afford to eliminate 3 divisions and then fight the others in a bit of a direct engagement. We can afford to do that. And it'll probably, hopefully, cement the friendship between the United States and the 1.32 million people of the capital city of Georgia forever. Operation Baltic Freedom is well on the way. And do we have the range with our Special Forces helicopter? We do. So let's go pick up that team from St. Petersburg. Just find yourself a nice parking lot. I'm sure none of the residents of the city will find it strange when a bunch of robots and power-armoured operators from overseas run off with a VIP in a tilt-rotor helicopter landing in the suburbs, but that's okay. Go with it. It's the 90s. Crazy stuff happens. All right, here come the GBUs. Yeah, it's definitely making an impression. Also, the fact that we're taking Abrams X up against T-72s being driven by a bunch of cooing ultranationalists is probably helping. But I think Georgia's going to survive this particular exchange. And attack helicopters just to add insult to injury. And the Baltic now has fire support. Sailor destroyer up there. So those should be liberated relatively soon, which is one of our objectives. All right, all good so far. He's about to make it out. SF team made it back to the UK, dropped off their VIP, so we'll infiltrate them again. Let's drop these ones into Ukraine. These will drop this off and then go to Moscow for that VIP. Solid progress. And high-speed bombers working on another military HQ. Let's swap all the bombers, the strategic bombers at least, back over to cruise missiles. Let's do more SAM hunting as soon as the bombers are back at base, apparently. And here's the relay I was talking about. So Lincoln can pick up someone from Vladivostok and then chopper them all the way over there, where they can then be choppered to Fort Wainwright. Just much, much faster than walking. Latvia transferred to separatists, very, very good. Security checkpoints being cruise missiled. Nothing wrong with that from a budgetary perspective. And what we'll need to do is, there is a security checkpoint in the way. So suborbital bombers dropping on Irkutsk, I see no problem with this plan. Okay, that's the separatists freed. It says the ultranationalists are probably going to change their priorities now, be careful. But their priorities with what is an open question. They appear to be struggling against these Soviet loyalists. I'm not sure why we're evacuating Gorbachev's mates from Moscow at the moment. They seem to be doing great, but mine's not to reason why. You are being rescued. Come with us. Hopefully the troops don't mind when important leaders keep surfacing in Poland while all this is going on. Well, I think the Georgian situation is about to be simplified somewhat. I pulled our divisions back just for a moment because there was about to be a better solution to this attack. The Roosevelt has arrived, and with it, its 6th generation carrier fighter complement. What do you guys know about the FAXX project? That is a lot of AGMs. Yeah, let's bring that into the Black Sea. VIPs are securing in friendly territory. Great work, that's half the VIPs. The hardliners are catching on now, so expect more resistance on the ground. They're actively hunting our operators now, so bring extra firepower. Oh, I don't think that's a problem. The sloggy match between the two Soviet sides, the ultranationalists and loyalists, has been absolutely brutal while this is going on. And while I continue to provide air support and do things like knocking out these ballistic missile sites, which are obviously firing on the other side, this has been ugly. And I imagine this is going to have an impact. This is going to have an impact on Russia, it's going to have an impact on the politics, it's going to have an impact on the people in the state long after all this is over. Because even though the ultranationalists haven't gotten nuclear weapons and no one's using, interestingly they are holding back. Both sides of the Russian Civil War are not deploying nuclear or chemical weapons against each other. The scale of these engagements is just huge. Especially after the embarrassment and the losses of the Able Archer War. This gotta hurt. Alright, we'll get the carrier to chopper this Spec Ops team out as more are being shuttled back to Turkey. We've basically cleaned the clock, but we have finished those drop capsules. So what I'm going to do is finish advanced 3D printing, use that to cut production time a little bit, and then if I can squeeze it in, I'd like to demonstrate the new technology at least once before the end of the mission. Let's see if we can do one completely necessary orbital drop into the former Soviet Union. Okay, that's our first theft. As I move Special Forces teams over towards the Space Center through a shuttle across my army bases, we've stolen advanced inertial guidance. Good to know that we can still paperclip the Soviets even when they're at this stage of their development. Okay, we have jumped forward. I believe we have 3 minutes 48 seconds to complete the mission, but the space shuttle that is has arrived at the Kennedy Space Center. So we're going to use this as a test option. After all, there's budget for ongoing operations. We might not get test budget if this is all over, so let's finish with a massive propaganda win. Let's extract this VIP from Baku using an orbitally inserted Special Forces team. We are going to orbital drop some democracy into the former Soviet Union, maybe around Rostov-on-Don, drive south, Baku, pull them out. Now, we could just drive across the border, but that's boring and isn't going to make the evening news in quite the same way, so let's do it this way. Wonderful. So this also lets me demonstrate the concept, because I think I might use it in future missions. This is cool. This is very cool. So it is global. Any insertion, anywhere. Okay, what's the delivery time? 24 seconds. What's the longest? Maybe... Yeah, okay. So significantly less than a minute to any point on Earth. I'm happy with that. We could, for fun, this would have been a fun way to pull the people out of Yamantau. But let's drop... Where do we want to drop? Actually, you know what? Let's just drop it. Let's demonstrate the concept of drop, grab, run. Wonderful. And then, for style points, we can extract by helicopter onto the Roosevelts and then fly them back to safety that way. So there we are. Space shuttle is flying. It should drop an orbital drop pod with the Special Forces team, suborbital drop pod, or however they're doing it. Bang, Special Forces team, that'll fly back to the Kennedy Space Center. We grab our VIP, get our carrier. I did a one-way delivery with one of my choppers, so if you're wondering why the Kennedy is down one Special Forces chopper, it's because I did a one-way delivery to an Allied airbase, which to my mind shouldn't destroy the chopper, but you know, it is what it is. Maybe it's just down the refueling schedule. Spec Ops helicopter pulls the team out, and then once they get to the carrier, we'll drop them into Allied territory. Proof of concept done. And look at the new stealth. We got Zumwaltz and CGX. What a fleet. Okay. Drop the SF team here. They drop the VIP. VIP secure and in friendly territory. Wonderful. We have one last Special Forces team that's just having beers in Western Ukraine. And they'll cross the border just as soon as Congress finishes signing off on the laser CWIS. We need that deployed, and then we'll duck across the border. All right, that's probably close enough given the way tech tends to tick over a little bit after the mission complete. There we are. VIP is secure and in friendly territory. All green. Let's get this to pop. Beautiful. Laser CWIS complete. We didn't get to steal the rabbit fever bombs, but I'm not exactly broken up about that. There we are. Mission accomplished. The Iron Curtain will finally fall. All missions complete. Total casualties. I apparently killed 132,000, Loyalists 127, Ultranationalists 113. I am betting this is almost all from bombardment of armies that were sitting on cities. That will be where almost all of that came from, unfortunately. And I forgot to show this for last mission, so I'll make sure I bring that in. If I forget, remind me in the comments. US casualties, obviously very, very light. Handful of aircraft and helicopters, so I'll call that a win. And we got some more tech unlocked, which means we're going into ground zero. That was a nice little narrative interlude of a mission, so to speak. It was certainly a nice breath, a chance to chill a little bit after the chaos that was Condor into Able Archer, which was, there was something. Oh yeah, we got 3,270 points, and the next mission is Ground Zero. So we're about to do some, we're moving into the GWAT era. So what do we need for the GWAT era? Blended wing airframes. So let's think about this. What do I want? I want to finally get as precise, low profile as possible, and I'm not sure what the game will give me in terms of objectives, but if I can avoid getting bogged down in a quagmire of occupation, that'd be nice. So the less airspace I need to violate, the less troops I need to put, the less boots on the ground, the better as far as I'm concerned. So blended wing airframes for global strategic mobility, because I'm sure there'll be some of that going on. Let's go anti-air lasers. Let's just finish off the Navy, so to speak. We shouldn't need missile defense yet, but we will need it we will need it soon. We shouldn't need missile defense now. If I pay for that, I pay for that. Definitely want to upgrade radars. So we'll get experimental search and tracking. I don't think we need to go quantum yet because this is the anti-stealth radar. And if Al-Qaeda has stealth, we have bigger problems, frankly. Laser defense, these satellites I really want to get into eventually. Laser defense satellites shoot down MIRVs and missiles, but you can also upgrade them to shoot down other satellites and also anti-satellite missiles. So if you get a big enough network of these, I wonder if they can defend themselves successfully and you can establish orbital superiority. Otherwise, ground-based ASAT weapons are just going to destroy everything. I think there'd still be one way that opponents could deal with it, which is they could build ground-based laser defense complexes, because those can shoot down satellites with lasers, but we're not there yet. This is most of the, as far as I'm concerned, the essentials. Okay, here's what I've ultimately gone with. We have one counterforce laser satellite and a space shuttle. Then blended wing airframes for longer range transports, anti-air lasers for our 6th gens, railguns for our warships. The next tier of radar tech, so novel wide spectrum, tracking and targeting, experimental army weapon concepts for the infantry, so the ground forces will now be fully upgraded because they're also getting advanced seaburn equipment. And then we could squeeze in stealth weaponry. I couldn't afford hypersonics, so instead what we're going to do is make it less likely that our cruise missiles get intercepted. Then I had a couple points left over. I really couldn't afford much, if anything, so I've grabbed a Spec Ops helicopter so I can do some one-way transportation, and a security checkpoint because there might be some dodgy stuff going on. All right, I'm happy. Let's go. Okay, here we are, Ground Zero. The widespread proliferation of nuclear weapons and the abrupt and tumultuous dissolution of the USSR has made it possible for radical groups to construct or obtain crude or stolen nuclear devices. While preparing to conduct a coordinated attack across America, a nuclear-armed Al-Qaeda cell was successfully apprehended in Washington, but another in New York was already lying in wait. The atomic bombing of New York killed tens of thousands of innocents and brought the world to a... That must be a small nuke. Shit, we just got nuked. That must be a small... If you're getting tens of thousands KIA in New York, that must be... That's a tiny bomb. That's a tiny bomb. I'm not sure what these dates are meant to be, because we didn't see any nuclear detonations during other missions. Those responsible must be stopped, but the looming threat of additional attacks still looms. Intelligence indicates there could be as many as 8 other similar weapons scattered across the US waiting for an opportune moment. So because of the Soviet Civil War, fissile material's clearly gone everywhere. Maybe that was an ad hoc weapon. Maybe they stole the material, not an actual device. Or maybe they just got a small... There were small munitions in Soviet inventory. Because that's... New York is so dense. New York is so dense, even compared to the cities of World War II, that must have been a tiny yield. Intelligence indicates that 8 devices, all the bomb trucks must be intercepted before they can detonate, while a manhunt across Central Asia and the Middle East will have to take place to hunt down or kill those responsible. And an invasion of Iraq seeks to destroy the alleged source of the weapons. Why would they come from Iraq? Oh, did they come from the country that had no nuclear weapons in inventory, or the one that just went through a massive civil war at a period of anarchy that had tens of thousands of them? I wonder. Okay, all right. We'll go with this. Primary mission, find and destroy all the bomb trucks on American soil before any more of them can detonate. I hope so. Invade and capture Iraq, invade and capture Afghanistan. Do not provoke a war with countries not declared hostile. Do not inflict more than 1 million civilian casualties. Use covert units to find and destroy all Al-Qaeda leaders spread across Central Asia without triggering a response from the host countries. And then it's Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, Yemen, Pakistan, and Syria. Complete the primary and secondary objectives within 45 minutes. Well, okay. Give me a second. Okay, I'm going to give you a strategic analysis of the mission and then cut the episode, but I'm also going to give you some reflections. And I've thought about this. I was originally very annoyed that we're being railroaded into going into Iraq and Afghanistan, but I kind of get it under the circumstances. My observation would be you need to think about the psychology in this universe and how it might be different for our own. And I think America's relationship and Americans' relationship with the military and military solutions will just be different. Because if you think about it, what happened is, in this timeline is, North Korea invaded South Korea, the UN intervened, and the Soviet Union started perfuming American and Allied troops, and yet they still got punched in the teeth, and in the end, America won. Then the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. The Soviets were going to put nukes in Cuba, but in this universe, the US preemptively, before those warheads got there, said, hey, we'll pull our nukes out of Turkey, and they said it publicly. And Moscow said no, which gave the US the diplomatic high ground, and then that military campaign, I think, was one of our cleanest. I don't think we lost aircraft and some ships. The Soviets nuked one of our submarines, but we won. And Cuba is probably still under American control, or at least pro-America in this timeline. Then there's Operation Condor, or whatever the actual mission was called, which I imagine would have created some tension between the military and the CIA. Because the military would have gone, the CIA set up all these tin pot dictatorships. The Soviets started invading because they were tin pot dictatorships doing tin pot dictatorship things. And the US military counter-invaded, threw them all out, and if the brief was to be believed, installed new democratic governments in South America across the board. So, and that was despite the Soviets openly using tactical nuclear weapons. That would have been a large mobilization of the US population, but it's a continent-wide conflict in South America. So you'd have a lot of American veterans. But again, they won and they won unambiguous. Same thing in Vietnam. Everyone was saying, oh, just one more push. In Vietnam was just one more push and we're going to win. And they were right in this universe. It was one more push, and they didn't just win in Vietnam, they won in the entirety of the region, in Laos and Cambodia and Burma as well. And then finally, Broken Bowman, the Soviet Union starts something, they invade, America mobilizes, NATO mobilizes, they punch them in the teeth, and they salvage the situation during the Soviet Civil War. So, two things are different. One, America still hasn't lost a major war. It's always ended well. And secondly, there's a lot more veterans in the US population, and a lot of them are a lot more recent combat veterans. There will be those who fought during the Soviet Civil War. There'll be a lot of those who are alive. This is 2001. There'll be a huge number of them alive who fought back the Soviet Union. So the level of confidence and the level of anger, because New York didn't just get hit, New York got nuked. I mean, Lady Liberty looks like she's missing a torch. I imagine that's just figurative, but... So all I can do is minimize the damage. And to me, that's going to follow a two-part strategy. The first is we have to protect against those bomb trucks. So what I'm going to do is disperse units as rapidly as possible. We're going to 100% production, and I'm going to produce like 15 security checkpoints. But every US city is about to get its hand held by something, be that a security checkpoint, an army division, a spec ops team, whatever. The other thing we need to do is we need to, as clinically as possible, get in there, eliminate these cells, get those responsible. And I think the first thing to do is, I'm not sure how well these are modeled, but we should have targets in Afghanistan that soon after this begins will run to Pakistan. And the problem is we can't start a war and we don't want to violate people's airspace and whatnot. We have huge amounts of resources. There are even divisions in Australia. The devs have very generously given Australia 4 divisions to deploy. And a naval task group, lots of special forces teams. So I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to drop in special forces teams, including using orbital insertion to get them into harder edge places. Use that for recon. And then, let's get this alignment just right. Something like that. And I think I will build a second one. After we get America secured, I'll build a second one. But I can imagine the United States, if they were umming and ahhing about weaponization of space, destabilization, etc., this is something that would absolutely kick them over and convince them that no, deployment is merited. So we're going to call this. This is the interface orbit nuclear cannon, and this is the nemesis. And the second one we'll call the Themis. So we'll have the gods of vengeance and divine justice orbiting over the relevant region, picking off targets that are spotted by the special forces. And if I do that, what I should be able to do is not send carriers. I don't want to go through the Straits of Hormuz. I don't know what is waiting for me, but I instinctively don't want to sail through Hormuz. So if you want to see an ion cannon deployed as a precise counterinsurgency weapon, as we try and get one back for New York, see you next episode.